Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. In this video, we are going to cover some very important and frequently asked scenario based design pattern interview questions. Now, that doesn't mean that if I'm covering factory design pattern or builder design pattern, that cannot be used in your old or monolith type of architecture, will only be used in microservice architecture. That's not the case. These factory patterns or the builder patterns or any kind of patterns that I'm going to discuss here today can be implemented in any kind of architecture. And that's the beauty of this video because it can be extended to each and every one of our live projects. So let's get started. And I'll give you one example, a very common example that most of us working in an IT company might have faced. Suppose you have developed an application or your organization or enterprise have an application, which is a prod ready application. Now, to get the payments from the clients, you have different options to be given to the customers. For example, you can take payments from credit cards, from PayPal, from UPI, for net banking, etc. Based on the user input, whatever the user chooses in the box or the radio button that I want to pay through credit card or the debit card or the UPI, based on that, you have to design such kind of system that only that particular service is invoked. Because you might have different services, internal services like credit card payment services, where you have the validations for taking the credit card number, checking the validity, and doing all those things. For the UPI, checking the valid UPI or not. So you might have different services like credit card payment service or the UPI payment service or PayPal service, so on. So how at the real time, in the real example, how would you instantiate these services rather than keeping all of them instantiated in the memory? How would you at runtime decide that I want to create an instance of this and give it to the user to be able to utilize, validate his payment and do the successful payment? So very good answer for this is that if your application is in need of different type of payments like credit card service, PayPal service, UPI service, you need to design a system in such a way that easily create instances of the current payment service based on the user selection at runtime. And the very beautiful solution to this is a very common design pattern that all of us might have used at some point of time. That is factory pattern. The factory pattern is ideal in this case because it allows you to create different objects based on the specific inputs. The factory pattern provides a very beautiful way to delegate the object creational logic to a central class called as factory. So whenever we implement a factory pattern, we always use something called a centralized class called as factory, making the code easier to maintain and extend. I have created a video on design patterns already, where I have covered all the creational design patterns like factory design pattern, builder design pattern, and all those things. You can have a look at this. If not, I'll create a very live video for this where I'm going to implement all these kinds of services like PayPal service and do all those things. If you want that, you can let me know in the comment section. I'll do that. Right now, this is towards the interview perspective. So I'm going to give the code here, what I have created. So here is how you can design your system. First, you can create the payment service interface. Why interface? Because it is a common interface where you will have one single method that process the payment, because be it UPI, be it credit card, be it net banking, you have to process the payment with the amount that is given, right? So this interface will be common to all the kind of methods, because all the kinds of services, because all the services are going to do the same thing, process your payments. After that, you have to create the concrete payment services classes. For example, credit card payment service, the PayPal payment service, the UPI payment service. And what is going to be common in all of them? They are going to process the payment. So that can easily implement our interface that we have created. Take the amount and process through the payment, through the PayPal, to the credit card, to the UPI, anything. So if these four things are clear, that we have to have one common interface to do the common thing, one different kinds of classes to do the same thing in different ways, to do the same payment processing through credit card, through debit card, through UPI, through PayPal. So one interface, multiple concrete classes doing the same thing in different ways. And how would you invoke these classes? So you have created interface, you have created different implementations of it. How would you at runtime decide which to pick? So at runtime, you would need a factory. Factory is nothing but a way to generate these instances of these classes at runtime based on the inputs that the user will give. So there will be one simple method, get the implementing class or the payment service. You send it in a string or in some kind of way, you depict that I want to do payment in this particular way. Say, suppose you send in string, I want to do the payment through credit card. That will be the task of UI. From the button, if you choose the credit card, then it's the task of your front end, be it Angular, be it React. It will give you a request that this user with this user ID, this payment amount, would want to do the payment in this particular payment type in the string format as credit card. Taking that as an input, you will decide that, okay, I get a request as credit card from UI. So what I'll do, I'll create a new instance of credit card payment service and return it. Remember, what are we returning actually? We are just returning an interface, because at runtime, it will be automatically be converted into the instance of credit card payment if you choose credit card. So that's how beautifully this static method, get payment service, when given anything in this string, will be able to create an instance based on that string. And that's the factory pattern for you. And how being the client code will decide, or the front end will decide, it choose the payment choice as list. It will give a call to the factory and say that with this choice, give me the payment service. And it has completely abstracted that this is the credit card service or the UPI service. It is simple payment service. And this is just the typecasting of your credit card payment service to payment service. And if it is not null, it is going to process your payment. And if it is null, it is going to say, sorry, your payment that you have selected is not in any of the if conditions of the factory pattern, so we cannot process your payment. And that's the beauty of factory pattern. So what you have done, just in a quick summary, you have created one interface. That interface is going to be used as the return type of factory pattern and as the return type of your payment app also, which will decide which payment is there and will process the payment. This process payment is the one single method in your interface, but is implemented in 4 or 5 different ways. You decide based on your input, based the radio button or the checkbox you have clicked on your front end page, you decide which payment method you want to do, and then a corresponding class will be loaded either with this new or with some service context or application context being loaded, and it will give you the proper payment service that you need based on your requirement being passed as the parameter to this service. Now, what is the advantage? So first, let's see what is this interface. This interface, all the implementations is going to implement this interface. All the concrete classes are going to be just the child of this interface or implementation of this interface. The factory pattern uses the factory class, which is very important class because it is responsible for deciding which payment to be used for based on the inputs that you have given. And the client code is the one who calls this. Now, what is the advantages? First of all, decoupling, because factory pattern decouples the complete object creational logic from the real business logic of processing your payment. Why should this person who is just processing the payment should see I should be chosen as the UPI payment or not? It is a task of the factory who decides which service to be invoked, and the task of service is only to process the payment. So this is decoupling. The second is maintainability. Now, suppose, for example, I have started using Bitcoin also as a payment. So how difficult is it for me to implement the Bitcoin implementation? I don't have to change anything. I just have to add one new class, implement this payment service and start implementing it, and just pass that as an input and just give an if-else condition here. So only 2 things changed. First of all, added a new class, Bitcoin implementation, and added an if-else condition in the factory. That's it. So how beautifully you can extend your application to multiple payment service handling also. And then the single responsibility is also there, because the single responsibility principle says one class should do only one thing. So here factory is doing one thing for creating multiple objects, and all the concrete classes are doing one thing, processing the payments. If you mix both of them, then one class would have decided which class to instantiate and also do the processing, which is not the right case. Single responsibility principle is also adhered to this. And extensibility, this pattern allows easy extension of payment methods without altering the core logic. The new payment service can be added just like what we have decided here. Any new can be easily added and there is no change in the codes. Hey guys, recently we have launched a course covering an end-to-end full-stack application using Angular as front-end and microservices and Spring Boot as the back-end. Also, we have used Cloud to deploy this application, and we have used CI/CD, that is Jenkins and Argo CD, for continuous integration and continuous deployment. The technologies that we have used is REST, RESTful web services, Spring Boot and microservices for backend, Angular for front-end. GitHub we have used for version control system. Also, to make the code unit testable, we have used JUnits. We have used Sonar for code quality checks. Also, for containerization, we have used Docker and Kubernetes. And to deploy this whole application, we have used AWS and multiple services from AWS. Also, we have used SQL as well as NoSQL, that is MongoDB and SQL. On AWS, since for the SQL we have RDS, we have used those services, and Jenkins and Argo CD for CI/CD pipeline. Also, this is an architecture of the application that we have created where the front end is Angular and the back end is microservices. We have used ALB load balancers, Ingress for routing and load balancing. And we have used SQL and MongoDB for SQL and NoSQL DB management with Eureka Server and all those microservices counterparts. Now, this is the CI/CD pipeline. This is the CI/CD flowchart for the application that we have created on local. So, this is something, a flow when you create an application in local, push it to GitHub, create a Jenkins pipeline, and do the CI/CD using Jenkins and Argo CD. And at the end, deploy the whole code at AWS EKS. Complete description of this course is covered in a very separate video. The link for that video is also given in the description bar below. And also the link to purchase that course from Udemy is also in the description bar below. So please go and check the description for all these links. If that is clear, I can go to the next second scenario. The second scenario is that you have an order class. Suppose you are using an e-commerce website, okay? Or you have created an e-commerce website. You have an order class. Now, how would you make sure that this order that the user has created is not modified by any case, by mistake or intentionally by anybody? So, if the user has created an order, you have to make this as immutable order object. And how would you make it efficiently? To make anything immutable with the optional fields, there is a way to do that. There is called as builder design pattern. Now, what does this builder design pattern do? The builder design pattern is ideal because it allows you to create the object step by step, ensuring immutability and flexibility. Now, with builder design pattern, object can be constructed incrementally, with optional fields can be set without the need of complex constructor and multiple setup. Too much of theory. What does builder pattern do? It helps you create immutable object. Secondly, if you have multiple fields but only few are to be set and others are to be left and still object has to be created, you don't want to create multiple big constructors where you are trying to add null to all the fields and still you should be able to create an order. Then in such case, use the builder pattern. For example, this is an order class where there is ID, customer name, shipper ingress, products, amounts, everything. Now, suppose I just want to create an order with ID, customer name and shipping address. Till now, no products and amounts has to be added. Just an order has to be created, which is not a real case scenario, but in case, selective fields has to be added. If I create a proper constructor to add this, then everything becomes necessary or something goes null for no reason. And the code gets, if I suppose 300 fields and just with 3 fields I want to create an object, it will be a nightmare for me with the constructor or the setters. So what you can do is rather than creating all those constructor with just 3 objects or using the whole all argument constructor, what you can do is you can use a builder pattern. Also, it makes sure that your fields are not changeable. That means your order object becomes immutable. So first of all, why to use? For immutability, the order will remain immutable, means once it is created, it cannot change its state. That means if your order ID is 101, you can never change your order ID to 103 or 104. Handling optional fields. Builder pattern allows you to easily handle the optional fields without the constructor with many parameters. Each field is set only if necessary. So again, if you have 300 fields, only 3 fields, you can also create the order object. Also, it makes it very better and clearer for readability part. Now, how would you implement it? I'll give you two implementations of this, okay? The first implementation is the manual implementation, which is a very lengthy one. And then I'll tell you how Lombok uses @builder annotation and reduces all the boilerplate codes to just very small code base. So let's get started. Let's first create the manual one. Okay, so this is an order class. It has the 5 fields: ID, customer name, shipping address, products, and amount. If you can see, all these order fields are final. That means once created can never be changed. But if this is final, who is going to initiate them? So first of all, let's see who is going to initiate them. But first, make sure that this class is immutable. How would you make the class immutable? Make the fields final, make the constructor private. So if the private constructor is there, nobody can explicitly create an object of order and will not be able to override your instance. It copies the value from builder object and add it to the main. Now you would ask me, what is builder class? It is nothing but an internal static class created inside the order class itself. So this is the outer class order. This is an inner class builder class. If you can see, all the fields, 5 fields that we have here, ID, customer name, shipping address, product, amount, is there here also. ID, customer name, shipping address, product, amount. One difference is none of them is final, because we're going to create an object of builder and we are going to assign it to the constructor, which is going to assign it to the order, and this is how initialization of these final fields will be there. And that's the beauty of immutability, because once the order object is created through this way, your fields cannot be changed. Your order object cannot be created directly because your constructor is private, and you do not have any setters. You only have getters. Get ID, get customer name, get everything. So the three things very important for creating the immutable class in Java: make the fields final, make the constructor private, only getters, no setters. All the 3 things we have done. Now, how to give this constructor the real values? To do that, you can create an internal class, name it anything. I have named it builder. Create the same fields but not immutable. Here it's just final. Use the setters, and in the setter you just don't set it, but you also return the object of the builder class with just one ID set. So this is how you incrementally create the object. I'll tell you how. 1 second. Just understand the concepts and you will see whenever we get into the main class, you will see the beauty of this builder class. So this builder class is the core of builder pattern. It mirrors the fields in the main class but with non-final mutable fields. Now here, we just don't set the ID or the customer name or the shipping address. We also return the object of this builder class, so that if I just want to set the ID, what I'll do is object, that is order.builder.id. It will return you the object that is builder. So as soon as you set the even one single field, you return the object of builder class. And this is how you can do the chaining. I'll tell you how. Similar goes with all the other fields. The product is going to be set in this and it is going to return the builder class. All of them are going to return the builder class. This is the very beautiful method of builder class and very important method of builder class, that is build method. What it will do is, this is going to create the immutable object of order. So return new order with this. That means this is what? This is nothing but a builder object. How is builder object returned? In every single setter, you return the builder object incrementally. When the builder object is properly created, you pass that builder object in the new constructor of order. Where is the order class? This is the order class, which takes an input, the builder class. The builder class is created incrementally with all the setters that builder have. So how would you create an object of this? Create new order. Now order is a normal class, but it has a static inner class called as builder, and it is static. So that can be called with the order.builder. So you create order.builder, then set ID. What does set ID do? Now builder.setID sets the ID as 1, 2, 3, but also returns the builder object. So as soon as you get the builder object, you can call the build method also. Because you have the builder object, with that builder object, you pass it to the new order, and the new order object is created with this builder with ID as 1, 2, 3. Rest all is not set, so everything will be null and your order will be created just with the ID 1, 2, 3. And that's how with only few parameters of the fields you can create the order object. That too immutable one, because that order's ID is completely final. You cannot change the ID, and its constructor is private. You cannot call the object of new karke order, and you cannot set also because you don't have setters. Similarly, here I have created only with the 3 parameters ID, customer name, and shipping address, and I have built it. So as soon as I built it, this build method, after all these things, have returned me nothing but the builder object. And this builder object is returned as an order, because this build method takes this, that is builder object, and creates the new order here. And hence you get the new order object created, which is immutable. So just for the quick explanation, the order class has multiple fields. Some of them might be optional. The constructor is private to prevent direct implementations, and this is created via builder pattern. The builder class is containing setters for each of the fields and returns the builder object itself, and it is designed to be chainable. This allows you to create the object step by step, and at final step you are going to return the object of order class, which is immutable, by giving the builder class object as the constructor in the build method. Immutability is there because once the order class is built, nobody can change it because the fields are final and all those things are there. Also, we have kept the fields product and amount optional and can be left unset during building the process, like we have done here. We have not used the remaining 2, amount and the products here. So they retain their default values, that is null, and 0.0 for the amount. So this allows the object to be created immutably and also with the optional fields. That is the order object created for you. What is the advantage? First is immutability, second is readability, maintainability, third is flexibility, and fourth is constructor overloading is not required here. You otherwise, if all the 5 fields are optional, I might have ended up creating 5 different constructors or even n number of constructors for combinations of this, where you give ID and customer name, keep everything optional. You give ID and shipping and keep everything optional. You give ID and product, keep everything optional. And can you just see the combinations? And if I have 100 fields, how many constructor overloading will you do? So that's the advantage of builder pattern. Now, if you get all the advantages of it, so much of code, I'll give you a very beautiful implementation that Lombok gives you with the @builder annotation. It helps you to build the builder pattern without manually writing any boilerplate code. And what it internally do is, first I'll give you the code, and then we will see how it works. Okay. So this is your order class. These are all your final fields. Keep it final, no problem. Just use the @builder over it. If @builder is used, how would you create the object in the main class? So you give order.builder method and do the set of all the optional or the required fields, leaving the optional fields, and just call the build method. Internally, what it will do is, it will create a static inner class called as builder. So this builder method is going to create a static class called as builder. It will create setter-like methods in the builder class for each fields that you have here. It will internally do it. You will not even know about it. A build method creates the object of this main class, that is order class. And a builder static method in the outer class gets the instance of the builder one that you have created. So getter automatically creates all the getters. Builder creates the public static builder class. That is an internal class. The build method constructs the immutable order. And static builder in the order is responsible for returning that particular object to the order class and build it. How beautiful is that? Now I'll quickly show how in the Lombok builder interface or annotation looks like. For example, I have a user DTO here. This user DTO have multiple fields. I have used @builder. So how I can create the object of this is very simple, like this, that in the user DTO, I have a method called as builder. And this builder method also have one more method called as build. And as simple as that, with only these fields, I can create the user DTO. So if you can see here, I can have one more saved user one with perfectly no compilation error. Why? Because this builder, if I get into this implementation, has this builder, that is this, and has this build that is this. Now, with this builder, you can add n number of fields like username as something, then also add a city with something. So this is how beautifully you can incrementally create your user DTO object with so much of data like user ID, username, city, address and everything, but only with the few parameters you can create the object of it. And that's the beauty of builder design pattern. If you can see here in the user DTO, I have not implemented anything in an inner class called as builder. I have not implemented a build method also, which is going to call the new user DTO object by passing the builder object. I have not done anything. It is a simple POJO, which is annotated with builder. And internally what this builder do is, it creates the static inner class, it creates the setters, it creates the build and builder method. This build and builder method is also defined in this builder and build method in this builder annotation also. And that's how beautifully it does it internally for you. Now, a third very important question, a performance optimization question for extensive API calls, extensively called APIs. So your application interacts with a third-party payment gateway that charges per call. For example, you use Razorpay or something, the third-party integration with the payment gateway. You don't have your own payment gateways. So if you ask others to, on your behalf, take the payment and give you the money, they are going to charge you for each API call you do to their APIs or their interfacing. So however, customers sometimes repeatedly try the same transaction and try to ask the status of their transaction. If they repeatedly see how my transaction is it successful, is it pending, when is it is going to be done successfully. So if they try to ask so many times about their transaction status, you will be charged n number of times. So I'll give you one very overview of this, okay? You are having a mobile phone, you are trying to get into an application, say Zomato or Swiggy, that is using a third-party application to get your payments done and will give you the response back, payment is successful, please wait, your order is being constructed. Now, in the meanwhile, when the payment, if they give a button, say, see the status of your payment, and if it is taking time, you hit it 10 number of times. Each hit will cost them, suppose $2. And if you hit 10 number of times, it will cost them $20. So such a waste. What will they do with this? You asking about your transactions, right? It is a loss to their business. So how would you make sure that these statuses are optimized? So how would you design a system to reduce the unnecessary API calls? That is done by you. And ensuring the up-to-date transaction status to user also, because they don't want to annoy you by giving that the transaction is in progress even though your money is deducted. Now, what risk exists if each request is directly forwarded to third party without they interventioning it? So every time you click the button, you hit the third party API, you make them charge $10 or $2 to the Zomato or the Swiggy. So if thousands of users do it simultaneously, just think about how much loss they will be doing on each call they do to the third party payment retrievers. Answer to this is proxy pattern or the cache. So to address this problem of reducing unnecessary API calls when ensuring the transaction status remains up to date to you, you can use a caching or the proxy. So what you can do is you can create a proxy layer that is an intermediate layer at the Zomato or Swiggy side and between the third party application. So whenever you check the status of your transaction, it will first hit the Zomato. It will see if you really are waiting for a long time, for like 2 minutes, your status is not updated to you, then only it will give a call to the third party and fetch the result or the status, like where is this guy's transaction right now. If just after doing a transaction, you hit the button to check the status, even after a few milliseconds, then it is of no use. It is going to cache it and says, wait, your transaction is in progress. So this proxy will cache the transaction response, and before forwarding the request to the third party, it will check whether the transaction is actually cached or not. Now, how caching mechanism is done? It will store the transaction status that it is in process and the cache expiry time. For example, the cache expiry time is 2 minutes. So every 2 minutes, it will ask the third party, have you completed the user's transaction? If it is success, tell me. If it is failed, tell me. If it is in progress, tell me. So this is how you can manage the cache expiration time also, which will ensure the information is periodically refreshed, and it will, even though it is failed or success, you will keep on waiting. It is also not the good user experience. So for some time you cache it will give you the same response, but after some time it will automatically refresh the cache. So if the request comes for a transaction status that is still valid in the expiration, proxy will serve from the cache. Otherwise, it will hit the third party and see what is the current status and will update the cache and you simultaneously. Does this sound too much of theory? Let's see the code first, okay? So there is a payment service that is used by Zomato or Swiggy. Now, what Zomato or Swiggy do is they implement a real payment service, which implements the transaction status method and simulate an expensive API call to the third-party API payments and will set the status based on the expensive API call that has to be done. But before that, they also implement one more service, that is cache payment service, which also implements the payment service. And it also have the real-time payment service object created, but also a cache created. So what their cache do is they do two things. If the cache is fine, the entry, and it is not expired, it will return from the cache map. If not, it will give a call to real service. So for that reason, in the cache, you have to maintain both the real service call and the cached service call. In the case of cached service, they have a key map where key is the transaction ID and the value is the status. So the key value pair. Now you try to get the status of the transaction. So you pass the transaction ID. What the cache will do is in the map, it will check whether for this transaction ID, do we have the cache is still there and it is not expired. So it says yes, cache is there and it is not expired. Then return the cache. What if it's already 2 minutes you have been waiting and the cache has expired? In that case, this case goes null. It goes false, and it will return the status after calling the real-time service. So what is the real-time service? The real payment service will get the transaction status by stimulating the real expensive call to the API. And as soon as it gets it, it returns the status to you, but also put in the cache for next 2 minutes. So after 1 millisecond, you come back and say, what is the transaction? You will get it from cache. After 2 minutes, if you come, you will not get from the cache. Rather, it is expired. So it will be given a real call to the third-party API for payments. And the Zomato will return you the real-time status only after 2 minutes. If that is clear, what was the second question or the follow-up question will be, what if you do not implement the cache? Then for sure there is an increased cost, because each time you hit, you will be charged. So if you have 2 minutes time barrier with the cache, you will prevent all the calls that were going in that 2 minutes time, and you will be reducing your operational cost. There's a slower response time because the third-party API takes time to process that, okay, this is transaction ID. How am I? Where am I? Okay, this is the status. If it is in cache, it is at the Zomato only and it will return you then and there. So this response time is also faster. Also, if you exceed the rate limit by any chance, for example, if you click 100 times the same button and if rate limit is not implemented at the third party side, it will go out of the rate limits. It will go unavailable. It will be service unavailability 401 or 500 internal server error. Anything can come. They would just go out of services and will be unavailable, and all the other users will also be in the problem because you've exceeded the rate limit by hitting n number of times. Also, there is unnecessary redundancy. Just because the customer is asking for the status every millisecond, it is not your responsibility to give that answer to them. Also, there is data staleness. There is a risk that you might encounter some inconsistency due to network delays that might affect the accuracy of the status that is presented to user. So by conclusion, you can say that cache prevents a lot of unnecessary IO calls, a lot of cost if it is if the API costs you something or the organization. Also, there is better optimized resource usage. So it's better to use that. Now, just to this, I would say that there was one of the situation that you have to implement the caching, but you cannot modify the source code. How can you achieve that? that can be the next tricky question the interview might ask you. That, okay, great, you have implemented the cashier. What if I'm not allowed to get into Zomato code and implement the cashier? How will you fix this? Answer to this is decorative pattern. What is decorative pattern? The decorative pattern is a perfect example of this design pattern where you are allowed to add the caching dynamically without modifying the object code. Also, at the end of this answer, I'll share how cacheable can also be a very beautiful decorator for this scenario. But the time doesn't permit me. If you want to know how decorator pattern be able to give the response similar to how caching can be implemented without manipulating the real-time services, just let me know in the comment section. I'll continue this video. I have many things to cover: the decorator pattern, then I have this observer pattern, then strategy pattern, that how would you implement discount percentage, like freight percentage, no discount, percentage discount dynamically. There are multiple things that I can cover, and much more trickier scenarios that are right now being asked in interviews. Just let me know in the comment section. I'll create the second part of this video. Thank you.